Everyone, welcome to part 2 of contextualizing your drawings. What we're looking to do in this tutorial is just to take them one step further. Last time we had a little look at adding scale to our drawings by inclusion of figures or other objects that we know kind of what size they are. So whether it might be including a hand or it might be including a neck onto something, we can see clearly how big things are. Also, we had a quick look at making selection areas, adding in little areas which might feel just like a bit of glass, things that help communicate what our ideas are, what they are about. I've decided to make a second video so it's not just so bombarding you with information, but with now some just slightly more advanced skills. Look at how we can communicate more in our drawings than merely just scale and placement of them. I think it's really important at any stage in your project to give little hints of colour wherever possible. It doesn't want to be, I'm not telling you to colour everything in, and certainly if you were to do that, try and keep a really limited and refined palette when you're doing so. But you might just want to add little bits of colour or material in places. So we are just going to have a quick look at that now. So the first thing we're going to do is I've chosen this object here and I might just give it a little wash of colour. I'm going to give it a little wash of colour and a little wash of shading. Now, as you can anticipate, if I go to my paintbrush tool and say actually I'm going to use this blue colour to paint on top, if I start painting on here, I'm losing all of my lines and the detail underneath. So what we want to do is create a new layer just over here, bottom right hand corner, create a new layer. And if we set that layer to multiply, then when we paint on top of it, you see all of our lines come back through really nicely. It's up to you how you want to paint. Some people like to just paint purely with a brush going in. If you've got good mouse control or you've got a tablet, that's often the easiest way to do it. Other people like to give themselves a selection area. So I might just go around here with the polygonal lasso. Again, when we're colouring in, we're not colouring on top of the black lines at all. So we don't have to be too precise, but if you can try and keep your path within the lines, it's really useful. So I might just do this area here. I'll rush it a little bit, not try and make it too perfect. But again, in your initial stages of your project, you're just looking to give things a little wash or a little essence of colour. You're not trying to say the whole picture. When you get back to the end, I think I've gone too far. If you make a mistake, you can press the delete key on your keyboard, the backspace key. So if you go to the end, you should get that selection area. It does make it really easy then to use paintbrush. You can even use a really big one just to fill in an area nice and quickly with a colour. So I've added that little wash of colour in there. I could obviously do the same with this bottom bit, but I'll spare you doing that so you don't have to watch me go through it all. Next thing we might have a look at is just giving things a little sense of shading. These have been drawn quite well and they've got these contour lines on which really help give them shape. That is really important, but if you haven't got that in your drawings, you do have an opportunity now to help communicate the shape once you've given it a bit of colour. Over on the left hand side we've got this tool here which is the dodge tool. Underneath it's the burn tool. Burn, typically as you might anticipate, makes things darker, child stuff. Dodge makes things lighter. So I might start with my shadows first. So I might go to my burn tool. If I right click, I can just increase the size of my brush, or equally you've got it at the top here. When we're shading, it's really important to keep the hardness of your brush down, okay? So it's a nice soft brush like this, not one with really hard edges. So keep your softness down and pick an appropriate size. So I might just add a bit of shading around here. Again, just maybe a little bit less, but some on this bottom edge, just where it meets the ground. And so I might just bring that over a little bit more that side. Instantly, it feels a lot more three-dimensional. You can equally do it with the dodge tool just to add a bit of a highlight on it. Just bring in a little bit of whiteness. And you can also give things a sense of material as well with it. So if you're wanting this to look a bit more like plastic, for example, or a shiny surface, I might bring the size of my brush down put the exposure up slightly, and then do some kind of lines on it like so, which almost act like little reflections. Okay, so I might just do a few lines like that, which just give it the sense of it being a little bit shiny. So that's something quite nice to experiment with. Don't fill in all of your drawings, but maybe one or two. The key ones that you want to communicate, the most important ones, do show them. Again, if you make any mistakes, I've made one down here, you can just use your eraser to clean it up. If you decide once you've done this that you don't like the colour you've selected, the great thing about Photoshop, and by doing each of your bits of painting on a different layer, is you've got the ability to change it at any time. So if you go to Image at the top of your screen, sorry again, that's cropped out, and Adjustments, and go to Hue and Saturation, I can then adjust the hue any stage that I like. So I can change it, I can make it black and white, so it's just purely shaded. I can make it lighter, I can make it darker. You've got full control over your colours afterwards. As I've said several times, what I would focus on is just using a really minimal palette. If you've looked at a designer, for example, you could use the pipette tool and take colour from one of their buildings if it's got a specific colour to it, or the designer's work, not necessarily a building. You can take specific colours. So if I use that highlighted area, you see it's a bit lighter. If I use that darker area, see I'm selected a lighter one. You can, of course, if you bring an image in, you can select that colour off there like so, and use that. So it really ties in with the stimulus you're looking at. Next thing I thought we'd have a look at is kind of adding texture. Typically we do this in a later stage of your project. But again, it's never too early to start thinking about materials and materiality. So what I thought I'd do is try using this one, which I've already rendered up a little bit. Think a little bit about lighting, drop shadows, and material. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to Image and Canvas Size and just give myself a little bit more space to work on it. Again, I'm just going to press those side arrows because I want the canvas to extend out this way. I'm going to put it in centimetres, a bit easier to work with. And so I might just put this up to 180 centimetres by 160. It doesn't matter, it's just all relative scale. When it goes into your portfolio, it will be A3, so it certainly won't be 180 centimetres wide. So I've given myself a bit more space to work. It's really nice on a page of drawings to have a bit of hierarchy. So hierarchies where some things will stand out, headline stories, smaller details. At the moment, all of these different drawings are kind of shouting at about the same volume. But actually, by adding a bit of colour to one or two, it will make them feel more prominent. And with something like this, which might be, a more important design, I might try and make it a bit bigger. So all I'm going to do is I've got several layers which make up this, from the people to the glass to the building itself. If you just go to your move tool at the top and drag a box over all of it, it will select all of the relevant layers. So it's not layer 5 because that's the one that I've got the paint on, but it's all the relevant layers here. And I might just scale it up ever so slightly. If you press the Shift key, you can make it wider and smaller. But I want it to stay proportional, but I just want it to be a bit bigger. Might place it over here and hit Enter just to confirm those changes. This way it's scaled up everything proportionally all together. If you're trying to do it one layer at a time, okay, you're going to get things that are really disjointed very quickly. So, quite happy with that. First thing I'm going to do is think about applying a material to it. So I've selected a material here. It's bronze copper. It's just an image of, I googled copper texture and it's one that came up. Now it wasn't what I was looking for, but actually it's got these kind of distinctive lines in it. And they're really good for just illustrating what I want to show you, even though this probably isn't the ideal material for a building. So I'm just going to select all of that, copy it, go back to my drawing page and paste it in. Now this is much smaller than my drawing. I'm going to scale it up. You'll see it will look really pixelated to begin with, but once you hit Enter, it should render out. It's not a great quality image. Try and find something a bit better for yours, you know, if I've got quite a small drawing page, you're not going to notice. I'm then just going to move this layer up, and I want it just on top of all of my other layers. Okay. First thing first I'm going to do is just go to the opacity on this layer. I want to be able to see what's behind it. So I'm just going to drop it down. We'll change it back in a minute. And I've got all of this excess material. So I'm just going to use this square rectangular marquee rectangular selection tool. And I'm just going to delete out what I don't need. So just selecting it, hitting delete. I want to keep a bit of information either side, but something like that is absolutely fine. Now, I've chosen this material because it's got these distinctive lines going across it, the sort of banding. When we look at these drawings, they've got these really nice sort of contour lines on them which help give it that sense of shape and form. If I simply apply this texture on top and just erase everything out, it's going to feel really flat, very, you know, horizontal and flat on what should be a curved surface. So what I want to do is give it that impression of being a curved surface. So what I'm going to do is go at the top of my screen, just go to Edit. In Edit, you find the Transform, and we're going to go down to Warp. What this enables you to do is where you've got these dots, these sort of anchor points, you can click and pull them. So if I click and pull these, can you see now I'm getting this curve into it? If I pull that out, you know, this material starting to curve. And what I'm trying to do is get it roughly in line with those contours. Doesn't need to be perfect, and this isn't the most precise way of doing this, but it is the most time efficient way of doing things. So again, I'm now just going to pull the top part down, like so. I've pulled it just outside of, you know, I've got this bit poking through. I can of course just pull these areas up and so hopefully get it recovered again. And I might just pull it in a bit like this. And I might just pull that up a bit further. There and there. Try and pull some areas in. And just try and move that up slightly too. I might move that hand. So I'm fairly happy with that. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Once you've got it wrapped how you want it, just hit the Enter key to confirm the changes. Now all I want to do is remove all of this area out from it. So I could rather painstakingly go around with my eraser, or I could go around with my polygonal lasso and select all of these areas and delete out what I don't want. But back here on layer 1 should be that original drawing that I copied over. So if I just use my magic wand tool, now I'm just going to select these outside areas, press that, for then press shift and select in there. What I've done is I actually selected everything other than this object. Okay, so everything else should be selected. Go back to my layer 6, hit the delete key, I can just delete that out. If that confuses you, by all means, just go in with your eraser and delete things. But I've now got that nicely wrapped around my building, like so. The next thing you'll notice if we put our opacity all the way back up is we've lost lots of detail that we might want. First thing you want to do with this is just put this layer onto multiply. You might then choose to go in and erase some bits that you don't want. So I might say, actually, I don't want this texture on this plane because this is a different surface and it wouldn't curve in the same way as the others. So I might just remove those little bits from there using my eraser. And then finally, it'd be quite nice to give it a little bit of shading. So I'm again just using my burn and dodge tool. So I'm just going to go down the side and burn that side, thinking that the shadows are, you know, our light source is coming from the top left. And I might just burn that up ever so slightly. It's a shame I picked such a pixelated image, because I think it would look quite good otherwise. The other thing that's slightly bothering me about this whole buildings, it does feel a little bit wonky. So I might just select it all again. If I go in with my shift key, I can just deselect the people layers, and I'm just going to hover over the corner and just rotate it around ever so slightly. So it just feels like it's standing up a bit straighter. Hit enter like so, and I can just move it back, keeping my people roughly where they are. The last thing I want to do, well, the two last things I want to do is I might just add, use my dodge tool on that layer and just brighten up that outside edge so it feels like light's pouring onto it a little bit more. Yeah, that's much better. The last thing I want to do is I'm just going to add some shadows in. So I'm going to take this layer with the material on. And if I just press the Option key on my keyboard, click and hold it, you can see your cursor changing. Press and hold the Option key or your Alt key on a PC. Drag that off like so. I'm now going to use this to create the shadow. I will just neaten it up ever so slightly. I don't want that detail around there. But I want the shadow to look a bit like the light is passing through the glass. We're not getting a shadow from there. So first thing we want to do is place it down onto the ground. So I'm just going to go to Edit at the top of my screen, Transform, and this time I'm going to go to Skew. So I've got Skew selected. What this enables me to do is just drag these corners and I can really pull it out and warp it. So I might just do something like that. And a fairly nice stubby shadow of it, which I'm just going to place at the base here. So I might use my arrow keys just to do some slightly more finer adjustments to it. When I'm happy with that, pull that in. I think that looks a bit better. Just going to hit the Enter key. Going to go in with my eraser and just take a little bit of that overlap out there like so. And I've got these extra little bits that I don't want. What a shadow does to a drawing is it really grounds it, especially when you've got a building, showing where the building meets the ground is really important. Obviously, this doesn't look much like a shadow because in shadows you don't get colours. So all we're going to do is just go to Image, Adjustments and Levels to your screen. And all I'm going to do is just change this bottom output levels. I'm going to take all the white out so it just becomes black like so. And then I'll just drop the opacity. So like shadow, you get other bits of light through it. This really helps my building feel like it's grounded, like it's sitting on a surface. The same applies for a table if you want to show how it meets the ground, or a piece of body adornment, how it meets the person, how it stands off from them. Adding a bit of shadow to your drawings is really, really key for doing that. Again, you don't want to do that on everything, but maybe on one or two key things. It helps your drawings pop. It gives you a kind of greater range. Because I'm being quite pedantic, I might now have a little look at these figures I've got down here and say, well, if the buildings cast a shadow, so will them, so will they. So I'm just going to do exactly the same thing, create a copy of them, edit, transform, skew, grab these corners, pull it down, pull them round a bit, okay. And what I want to do is obviously ensure that my shadows are all going in the same direction. So we've got a single point of light. So I've not done that terribly well. He's at a bit of a different angle. So I might just be cheeky and instead of just undoing it, just rotate it round a little bit more, place them at the feet. That's a bit better. And drop the opacity down. Now, I won't do it for the others, so I won't bore you with having to watch that. But now all of a sudden, my designs are progressing on a little bit further. Sometimes by spending a bit more time on them, look at how you can add materials, shadows, textures. It can give you new ideas. I'm already looking at this building and thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I had multiples of them? What happens if I selected this, dragged it across? What happens if I now kind of erased all of the bottom section off one of them and added it on? What happens if there was a set of, 5 or 6 of them? What happens if there was multiples of the same thing? And again, might just move all of these layers down, so they're behind your other building. Okay. Might then need to just go in and just erase that little bit of white there on the layer behind. But you can see how really quickly you can create these sort of composites, which could be really nice. So, best of luck with experimenting with some of those things, adding textures and materials, adding shading and tone, adding colour, adding shadows. There's lots you can do with a simple drawing to really enhance it, to really push it further. You can also, whilst it does take a bit of time, remember I'm not having to redraw things. I'm taking existing components and working them up. So you're getting more bang for your buck. You're getting more designs out of the same thing. So I wish you best of luck with that. I can't wait to see what you get on with. Bye.